Ezekiel chapter 19 and verse 1. Moreover, take thou up a lamentation for the princes of Israel. And this should really say prince, speaking of Zedekiah, the last king of Judah in Jerusalem, because as you know, Jeremiah and Baruch took the daughters of Zedekiah to Great Britain, and there you have the scepter of Judah to this day, as was promised in Jeremiah 33 as well as other places, that a descendant of David, the king line of Judah, that is to say, would always reign upon his throne until Shiloh come, as we know from Genesis chapter 49. The scepter shall not depart from Judah until Shiloh come. That's speaking, of course, of the true Christ, the rightful heir to the throne, who will return at the seventh trumpet to reign as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So again, moreover, take thou up a lamentation for the prince of Israel, the prince of Judah, the king of Judah, Zedekiah, and say, what is thy mother? A lioness. A lion is symbolic of the tribe of Judah. She lay down among lions, and she nourished her whelps among young lions. And remember in Daniel chapter 7, when looking at this in the futurist sense, a lion is written of there, and that's symbolic of the Christian nations, Judah, Ephraim, and Manasseh. And she brought up one of her whelps. It became a young lion, and it learned to catch the prey. It devoured men. And this is speaking of Jehoiahaz. And after Jehoiahaz, we'll have those last three kings of Judah, Jehoiakim, Jehoiakim, his son, and Zedekiah. And you can apply that to those three that are plucked up by the roots, as we're about to find out in verse 12 of this chapter. But she was plucked up in fury. She was cast down to the ground, and the east wind dried up her fruit. Her strong rods were broken and withered, and fire consumed them. And it's at the consumer stage of the locust army, where the fire, smoke, and brimstone, which issues out of their mouths, the deception, that is to say, kill a third of men spiritually, and a third of the world are Christian. So this applies to us today. This isn't just historical, but it is a type to learn from. These things happen as an example to us, upon whom the ends of the world are come, as it's written in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 11. Verse 4, the nations also heard of him. He was taken in their pit, and they brought him with chains into the land of Egypt, which is symbolic of bondage, and Jerusalem is called spiritually both Sodom and Egypt in Revelation chapter 11, whenever Satan appears there as the king of Babylon of the end times. Now when she saw that she had waited and her hope was lost, then she took another one of her whelps and made him a young lion. Now this is Jehoiakim, and he went up and down among the lions. He became a young lion and learned to catch the prey and devoured men. And he knew their desolate palaces, and he laid waste their cities, and the land was desolate, and the fullness thereof by the noise of his roaring. Then the nations set against him on every side from the provinces. And if you look up this word nation in the Hebrew, you see there a flight of locusts. So in the futurist sense, this speaks of the locust army and that consumer stage in the middle of that 5-month-long hour of temptation, whenever Satan appears, and those three Christian nations symbolized by the lion are pulled up by the roots. So the nations set against him on every side from the provinces and spread their net over him. He was taken in their pit. And they put him in ward in chains, going into captivity, which is what will happen to Christendom whenever they worship the false Messiah, that is to say, Satan, and brought him to the king of Babylon. Babylon means confusion, and the king of Babylon of the end times is Satan when he appears as Antichrist. They brought him into holds that his voice should no more be heard upon the mountains of Israel, mountains symbolic of nations. Thy mother is like a vine in thy blood, planted by the waters. She was fruitful and full of branches by reason of many waters. And the waters are symbolic of peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues, as we know from Revelation chapter 17. And she had strong rods for the scepters of them that bear rule, and her stature was exalted among the thick branches, and she appeared in her height with the multitude of her branches. But she was plucked up in fury, and again, Daniel chapter 7, 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. Whenever the little horn appears, whenever Satan appears as the false Christ, she was cast down to the ground, and the east wind dried up her fruit. Her strong rods were broken and withered. The fire consumed them. The consumer stage of the locust army is where you see that fire, smoke, and brimstone written of. And now she is planted in the wilderness, in a dry and thirsty ground. This concerns the son of Jehoiakim, Coniah, also known as Jehoiakim. And fire is gone out of a rod of her branches, which hath devoured her fruit, so that she hath no strong rod to be a scepter to rule, not in Jerusalem, because Zedekiah would be taken into captivity, taken into Babylon, that is to say, and Jerusalem would be burned with fire historically, which looks forward to what happens in the middle of that 5-month-long hour of temptation. It happened in the middle of July, according to Josephus, which is the middle of May through September. That's not to say that the 5 months will happen during May through September, but that is the term of the locust. This is a lamentation and shall be for a lamentation. So there you have it. Historically, we started with Jehoiahaz, who was taken into Egypt, after which you had Jehoiakim, his son Jehoiakim, and Zedekiah, the final king of Judah who reigned in Jerusalem. But the daughters of Zedekiah were taken to Egypt and then to Great Britain, where the scepter of Judah is to this day called Ephraim prophetically, and from Ephraim came Manasseh, which is the United States. So all of Christianity is symbolized by Ephraim, Judah, and Manasseh, and those are the three that are plucked up by the roots, symbolized by the lion in Daniel chapter 7, whenever Satan appears as the false Christ. All that will remain of Christianity at that time will be those with the seal of God in their forehead, those who have not bowed a knee to the image of Baal, God's elect. At the end of that hour of temptation, the true Christ shall return, the rightful heir to the throne, and he will reign from that point forward as King of Kings and Lord of Lords all the way up into the third world age, that is to say, the eternity.